Alright, today I'm going to go through a game on Board Game Arena that's been there for quite some time called Lewis and Clark. When I first started getting into Board Game Arena, uh, I loved it. I loved the setup and everything. And then they came out with this new game, Lewis and Clark, and I was like, okay, let's try this out. And I became in the top 10 for Lewis and Clark. I went out and bought the board game, got pretty good at it, and yeah, I was in the top 10. Back in the day, top 10 wasn't very high. Like I think I made it to, you know, close to around 300 prestige points. But when a game's starting out, that can get you to the top 10. So this is going to be a look back at my game against a 300 level player and me trying to get into the 300 level. So yeah, without further ado, let's kind of go into it. And if you already know the rules for the game, that is great. If not, then that's all right. I'll teach you along the way. Okay, but the game is not. This is not meant to be a teach. It's more meant to be a replay of it, to maybe familiarize everybody watching this channel with kind of the flow of Lewis and Clark. Because if you want to get into it, I can later on make a tier list of the cards in the game, and then that can help somebody become better at the game once you have a tier list of it. But first, I gotta introduce you to the game. So let's go through to the different moves that we make. So the way the game kind of works is you have these 4 resource adventurers that you start with, and they give, this guy would give fur, this guy would give equipment, this guy gives you food, this guy gives you wood, based on the number of symbols that are out on the player to the left and right of you and you yourself. This guy right here gives you Indians, which are like a worker. You played worker placement games maybe. This worker can be put out on the board as a turn to grab you things instead of playing one of these cards. Now, every time you play one of these cards, you're going to be using another card to power it up, making it so you can't use that card again until you reset. When you reset, it's called camping. You will lose that many days on your journey, so you'll go backwards on your journey. So right now we're on the river spot 5. If I camped right now, I would have lose 6 days, and is really bad if you go to space 0. There's a warning there if you read it there. So yeah, don't go to space 0. But yeah, and then you have this guy, your commander. Everybody starts with these 6 cards. Your commander moves you forward 2 spaces in the water for every food, 4 spaces in the water for every canoe, and 2 spaces in the mountains for every horse. And we don't have to worry about the mountains till later, but actually I think the strategy of the game is getting really savvy with those mountains early on, so you have a way once you get there. Otherwise, you have to switch around your strategy. So let's move through and see what I do. My first turn, I grab a bunch of equipment, because equipment and fur are pretty great at getting you new cards. Okay, so I grabbed, let's see, I used my equipment guy. There's 1 equipment symbol, and then I used my Indian guy, grabbing guy, the interpreter. He would grab the Indians from the middle of the board and bring them to me. And on the back of his card he's a 2-level card. There's 1-level cards, 2-level cards, 3-level cards. He's a 2-level, and with that, he's able to power up my other guy to strength. So I did this action twice, allowing me to get exactly 2 equipment. I started with 1 equipment. Both players will start with an equipment, a food, and a fur. So now we go to Categirn's turn, and what he's going to do is he plays the blacksmith, copies me, and since I already had my blacksmith out, he's able to get even more useful stuff out of that, even more equipment. So he's a big copycat. And with that, you can look at some of the things you can buy. You can always recruit on your turn. And so he could recruit. He has 1 fur and a bunch of equipment. So he could recruit this card right here, but he's limited on his fur. So probably his next move is going to be grabbing fur. Well, what I end up doing is I end up playing my thing that gets me some fur. I even use an Indian to do it. Okay. And I see that this guy's going to give canoes, and I know I'll need canoes to really move up fast in the water. So I do that. I turn in all my stuff, grab this canoe guy, Pierre-Antoine Tabio. Okay. And I'll need wood and food to turn into canoes right there. Okay. You win the game when you get to this Fort Clatsop. It's that little American flag there when you get there. And so it's really a race game, which is kind of cool because a lot of games are point based. This one's a race game. You'll notice my camping is down to 3, so instead of going back 6 spaces, I'd go back 3 spaces at this point. The reason being is I have 3 cards still left in my hand. Every card counts against you, and each equipment you have that's too much. See, these 3 equipment would fit into my free boat. Then there's one boat that gives you 1 extra day lost, so it'd be camping 4 instead of 3 if there was a resource in here. And this would be 1 day per equipment in there. You don't want anything in that thing. Alright, so you kind of get the flow of it. So then he plays something that just fills him up with fur. Tons of fur. He's able to even copy my fur. And with that, he's going to pay a bunch of fur, discard a card. Now, I didn't tell you that, but you can discard cards. So he gets rid of his dog, his food gatherer. And instead, he recruits that old Toby guy. And what old Toby would do is you can use a canoe and a horse to move 6 in the mountains or 6 in the water. Doesn't matter. So that's going to be a real killer thing that he can do. As for me, I decide at that point to just camp. So I go back to 3 days. Okay. But my turn's not over. You can camp and you can recruit during your turn once, but you have to on your turn either play out an Indian or play a card. This time I choose to play a card that gets me Indians. So now I have 2 Indians. I also decide to recruit John Newman. So now I have 8 cards total. I never chose to discard a card like he did. So now with John Newman, he's able to move in the mountains or the water using food. And then my opponent, Categirn, I guess, my opponent ends up taking some wood. I end up playing John Newman with a strength of 1 to, or no, I use John Newman for gathering wood, so I now have a bunch of wood. My plan is likely I'm going to go and get some boats from that, so I can send out these Indians to the middle of the board to grab some boats. My opponent sees what I'm doing, and they first grab a boat. So now there's only 1 boat left over. The boat that he grabs is one that is, going to add 1 extra day if he has anything in it, but it can hold a lot of stuff. Now those are my least favorite boats. In fact, I would advise against getting those. Because you don't want to have a lot of resources left over at the end of a turn. So the other boat is this one right here, Resource Boat 1 versus Resource Boat 2. Resource Boat 1 lets you have space in it. Also, anytime you grab a boat, there's 4 different types of boats. Resource Boat 1 and 2, and then Indian Boat 1 and 2. The 2s are going to make you lose days if you have anything in there. The 1s, you don't lose days on your journey, but they can't hold as many things. So yeah, anytime you fill up a boat, you can, if it's a resource boat, you gain 2 resources. If it's an Indian boat, if there are Indians in supply, you gain Indians. So let's see what I end up doing. Oh, and then he discards the lumberjack, so he gets rid of his wood guy forever. You won't need it anymore. And he grabs Weshe, which is somebody who pay 2 equipment, and then you move your scout as many spaces forward in the mountains as there are visible equipment. What's a scout? So these guys are scouts, and this is your camp. When you camp, you move your camp to where your scout is at. You win the game when your camp reaches for its Clatsep, not just your scout. So now the time comes to I sent my Indian out there, grabbed a boat, and got 2 resources, a fur and a food. And then I recruit my 9th character. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, just my 8th. So I guess a little while back I must have used a card. I discarded a card to collect. Yeah, I discarded my blacksmith. So I no longer have a blacksmith, but I do have John Newman. So that's how I was able to grab John Newman earlier. So for Categirn's turn, he gets a bunch of fur. And with that fur, he used it to recruit the best card in the game, Sacagawea. So Sacagawea or Sacagawea, she's able to perform, her card ability is perform an action on the middle of the board without paying an Indian. She's also a 3-level card, so if she's used to power up somebody else, and that other else person can do their action 3 times. Very powerful card. Makes it so you don't even really need the Indians. Then I decide to cash out a bunch of canoes that I've earned. Sorry, I decide to turn wood and food into 2 canoes. And I do that twice so that I have a bunch of canoes now. My opponent they use Sacagawea. They discard their commander, the commander being the one that lets you move up spaces. Discarding their commander so that they can get Hawk's Feather, which would be paying a food and getting 3 movement forward. So they have that ability to move forward in the river, and they had that other card prior that gave 6 movement in the mountains. So they're going to be really fast when they go through mountains. Alright, it comes to my turn. I play my commander, and then I move forward just a little bit, just 1 power. So I choose one of those actions. I just choose the canoe. I can only do his action 1 time, but that's right. And now you'll notice it says camp exclamation point at the very top. That means, well, now you see it. That means that, of course, you want to camp right now. It'll bring your cards back in to your hand, so your opponent can't use your symbols to get more resources, and you don't lose any days. You're at 0 days of if you camped. So I camp on space 6. Now he is going to use Old Toby to power up Hawk's Feather, moving 9 spaces forward, spending only 3 food. Pretty powerful ability there. And then what I do is I gather some Indians up. Oh yeah, and then he actually camped. Forgot to tell you that. So his camp's ahead of mine. I gathered the Indians up, he uses Sacagawea 3 times to, what he ends up doing is he collects some fur, he collects some food, so 2 fur and 2 food he collects, and then he does this action space, the farewell. So he discards 0 to 3 cards from his hand, and then discards all the character cards from the journal entry. So all these guys got discarded, and then we have all new ones. Did he discard any from his hand to get rid of? Nope, he didn't get rid of anybody from his hand. But I think he just wants to see what else is new out there, which is a pretty strategic move there to try to see what else he can grab, kind of refreshing the deck. I, on the other hand, grab a bunch of wood because my strategy is the long game, trying to get a bunch of cool boats. He then moves forward a bunch in the water, using Hawk's Feather once again. I grab a bunch of wood again. Or I actually spend my wood to get a boat. So now I have another boat. I just go boat crazy. He plays a blacksmith, getting so I got rid of my blacksmith. He got rid of his food guy and his commander. So wonder what he's gonna do there. Probably gonna grab a horse. Okay, and then he's happy where he's at. He camps. Having only 6 people is a lot better than having 8 people if you can make the engine work. So then I moved an Indian out. I went to the expedition upgrade. Getting my 3rd boat. He sees what I'm doing. He discards his fur trader to recruit Kamahuate to change horses into canoes and vice versa. So that's really powerful with his with what he's doing. So he's got a way to make horses and canoes move through anything. Mountains, water, doesn't matter. And he's got a way to make the cheaper canoes turn into horses and vice versa. And that's a 3 power card, so you can power up something else with it. Incredible moves he's got going on. And for me, I recruit somebody called Tetoharsky, which moves forward in the mountains. So put an Indian from your boats to the power area and move forward in the mountains for each 3 resources you have in your boats. So I've got a bunch of boats ready, so I'm going to have a chance to move forward a lot there. I actually use my commander's 3 canoes, move right on top of his space, jump over the orange scout. So if you ran on somebody's space, you move forward 1 space. That is for sure the rule, except for on space 5. Multiple scouts can be on space 5. My opponent uses Sacagawea, gets some fur and some food. And then recruits Big White, paying really no cards discarded. Big White is a 2 power card, allowing him to get gather wood or equipment. So a lot of these 2 powered cards will have, like, this one's a wood or fur. Well, he just recruited one that gives wood or equipment. And then on my turn, I decide to get some food, and camp. And I go back one day, but that lands me on top of him, so I get bumped back another space. So that costs me one space in the game, which will matter in the end. Um, so Categirn, he plays his old faithful Hawk's Feather, moving him forward up right to the neck of the mountains, and now he's got to start climbing. But he decides to camp right there. And I play a canoe maker guy for me, getting a bunch of canoes. Okay. Then he plays his blacksmith, getting some equipment, getting prepared to horse through the valley. And I play the hunter, getting some food. I'm getting a bunch of items. My opponent moves forward in the mountains based on how many mountain symbols there are visible. So there's only 2 mountain symbols that he has visible. Glad I didn't play any. He does that 2 times, so he's able to go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in the mountains, spinning his 4 equipment. That's kind of a nice way to move through mountains. Now, my turn, I end up playing my commander, moving up to the neck of the mountain like him. And we'll stop that there. That'll be video 1 for Lewis and Clark. But that just kind of lets you know the feel of it. And I might come back to this later, but a 20-minute video, that's good enough here.